Fam, I want to talk about China. Can you believe that? I want to talk about China.
No, I can't believe it.
I want to talk about Hong Kong. I want to talk about what's going on and where the United States elites or the United States government will be looking towards starting a new war with China. I'm talking an actual heated war, not just a Cold War, not just a trade war. It can get serious out there. And it all starts from what happened on July 1st. Now, I'm going to read this right here. This is Moon over Alabama. I was going to do some reporting on this when it happened, but we were so overloaded. But I'm glad that I waited because some new information has come to light, including a new interview with somebody from the Hong Kong Decency Freedom Act, or whatever you want to call it, the bullshit, yada, yada, yada one. But this starts right here, July 1st. A new law liberates Hong Kong from U.S. interference. After the U.S. instigated riots in Hong Kong last year, the central government of China saw necessity to intervene. In sight of other anti-China measures the U.S. has taken, the reputational cost of doing so had become less important. Yesterday, the Chinese in Parliament, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, added a national security law to the basic law that governs Hong Kong's special status. The law designed to end foreign interference in Hong Kong. That's why they put this out there, fam. The basic law already had an article which stated that Hong Kong's independent parliament, the Legislative Council, or LegCo, must create such a national security law on its own. But 23 years after Hong Kong became ruled by China, Hong Kong's parliament had still not done so. The foreign investigated violent riots last year, which had paralyzed Hong Kong's economy, demonstrated that such a law is necessary. The central government finally acted and did what the LegCo was supposed to do. The new law, which was put into effect today, is banning secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with any foreign country or external elements to endanger national security. Its 66 articles ban in any form for such acts. The offenses are punishable in several degrees up to life in prison. The law includes guarantees of human rights and due legal process. So if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see it's called Article 38, fam. So what they're trying to do basically, and this was a very serious thing, when a lot of people talked about Xi Jinping's holding back of not interfering, I think that what the United States and the CIA wanted to do was continue to get these protests going on and on and on and on, and we know there's links to them. We're going to show right now in these articles the links from the United States government again, but they wanted to pull Xi Jinping and the Beijing army in. In other words, show the world how authoritarian they are. Bring in the army, have them suppress the crowds, and then blame it on China, and therefore they can push their rhetoric of like China's authoritarian, they're evil, look what they're doing. But Xi Jinping laid back. He didn't take the bait. It was almost like the same activity in the Ukraine when a lot of people said, let's go Putin and Russia in. Let's show the world that they're evil and they're attacking protesters. Both of these parties laid back. So what they did now is on Article 38 is they put in laws that says no longer are you allowed to let these NGOs come in. And if we find anybody connected to these NGOs, anybody connected to other foreign entities, we're going to prosecute you on the mainland.
So here's the counter argument to that, right? Because this is going to be the common argument. That is very authoritarian. That could allow protesters who aren't actually happy with what's going on there to be prosecuted up to life in prison. That seems a little excessive to me. What is your response to that criticism of what he did?
You're talking about Xi Jinping, pretty much?
Yeah, I'm talking about the order because in keeping all those NGOs and stuff out, you're also that's a very authoritarian thing to do. Also, to make sure that nothing happens. I understand why he's doing it, but I also see the other counter argument. I'm asking, what is your?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's first of all, we have to recognize the fact that China, Hong Kong belongs to China. You know what I'm saying? If you go back to the history of China and you go to the history of Hong Kong, how it was an opium island. You know what I'm saying? The poverty in Hong Kong is way higher than it is in China. And China, even though they've been patient to take back Hong Kong and put it under rule, they've still kept their special status intact. However, United States is going to use this, and I don't understand. I can't argue against. If we had somebody trying to rage against our government over here or try to overthrow our government, what would we do? You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
we would prosecute him. We would throw him in jail.
We're already doing a lot.
No habeas corpus, whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a straw man argument to say, hey, why can't China then enact the same type of laws that we have in the United States? You know what I'm saying? Overthrowing the government in the United States, why can't China do the same thing? Especially when we're taking outside interest and money and pumping it in. And there's all these lines. People know what the NED has done, fam. If people don't know, I mean,
people don't know. That's what I'm saying.
Explain
they have no idea.
NED is.
People think that China, even the protesters here now, think that what the Chinese like pro-democracy groups are doing is a good thing because they're fighting for democracy under an authoritarian China. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, how do you explain that to those people and say that, oh, this is all caused by the United States and the NGOs? Because some people are pro-capitalism. Some people do want China to like, they want that authoritarianism gone. They want to get rid of communist China. They want that. So you can't say that some of these protests aren't real.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say that the protests are real. I wouldn't even say that they didn't start off in a real sense, but fuel has definitely been thrown in the fire. It's funded by NGOs, and the NED is the main culprit in this one. And people have to understand where the NED started, what its main purpose is, and how many countries it's overthrown. So you can say, listen, that's a fair argument, but we shouldn't have groups like the OAS, the NED, pumping monies into the opposition just to cause these problems. And they are. And the really good thing about this particular interview that I'm going to put up right now, because I'm glad that I waited to talk about this, because Afshin Rattansi, who's on RT, who was once on Al Jazeera, he's great. He has these unbelievable interviews. It's called Going Underground, his show. He got to interview one of the leaders of the Hong Kong democracy freedom fighters, as they call themselves, fighting for democracy. And you can watch, and we'll talk about this. It really, really breaks it down. Now, I want to point out, John, if you show that tweet up there real quick, can you guys see that this has 0 likes, 0 shares, whatnot? You know what I'm saying? I know it's not the most popular subject, but I know people would just give me a like for me being me. 1 or 2 or 3 likes. It's got to have been shadow banned whatsoever. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you could go to that tweet, like it, see if you can find it, see if it's on my page. If not, but let's break down this interview, because all those questions you just asked, we kind of go back and forth. Afshin goes back and forth with Nathan Law. And like I said, Nathan Law was close friends with Josh Wong. All these people went to the United States. And look who they're doing business with. DeMarco Rubio's.
Right.
Is even Pelosi, pictures with Nancy Pelosi.
Something you have to, guys, look into that you can't deny in regards to China is how both the Democratic Party establishment and the Republican establishment are in agreement when it comes to China, and how they've been working together to say, oh, we have to support China in attaining democracy. That right there is a red flag to me as somebody who knows, wait a minute, these fucks never agree on anything. Unless it's a war and profiteering. And so that to me lets me that I need to take a step back and analyze, why would these people actually want to spread democracy? Because when America says they want to spread democracy, they mean they want to conquer and engage in imperialism abroad. So that in itself, even if you're suspect of China, even if you think China is authoritarian, both can be true that the United States is fueling this in order to capitalize on China's weakness.
Yeah, and I just put in that tweet, family, and I'm so glad that you mentioned all that, because that's the argument. It's, China's authoritarianism versus American imperialism.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Both are true, right? Okay. Right. But how do we really justify the means that everything we do when we have this imperialistic just culture of the United States government since we were born? So that's the first point he points out right here. It's about, what about American imperialism? Isn't that fueling the extra extensive Chinese authoritarianism? Let's take a look.
You see, Chinese authorities claim that this is imperialist meddling. They accuse Hong Kong human rights groups of being sometimes in the pay, but often linked to CIA-backed organizations, let alone U.S. government-funded NGOs.
Well, these whole acts from Beijing has always been used to stigmatize the whole movement. They have never provided any relevant evidence for their accusation, because these are not true. Hong Kong people come out to protest for their own sake and for the sake of democracy, and because China have not been doing what they have promised the Hong Kong people, which are democracy and autonomy. So, this kind of narrative for China is being used to fool its own citizens and try to fool the world, but the world refused to listen to these lies. So it is important for us to recognize that this is a movement mobilized by Hong Kong people themselves instead of so-called foreign hostile forces. And this is not about imperialism. It's about China's authoritarian expansion. They wanted to control Hong Kong and eradicate all the freedoms that we have enjoyed.
Is it a means to an end? for so-called human rights activists to work with CIA-linked organizations? Because the National Endowment for Democracy is clear that it has a role in the pro-democracy movement. Professor Zhu Zhangrun, who has been imprisoned, a constitutional law professor who we asked about on this program, he wrote for the National Endowment for Democracy. It's on their website.
There you go. Stop.
And the NED, obviously funded by the State Department.
All right, so there's the first part right there. He makes the claim, and now Nathan Law has been accused with Joshua Wong taking a lot of funding from the NED, taking a lot of notes from the NED. The whole way they did. Remember, people talk about the Hong Kong protesters. Well, where do you think that blueprint was drawn up? By the NED, the CIA, all this stuff to go and counteract all these protests. So that has always been the claim. That has always been, no, we're not getting anything from the outside, whatnot.
Right.
But here's the thing. Afshin, black and white, fam. No, you're the NED. You know what I'm saying? And then he'll try to downplay the NED coming up in the next clip. But do you have anything to say about that clip right here?
Well, I mean, it's just going to be hard to prove otherwise. To a lot of people, because here's a person from China telling you that there's no that this is about China's democracy and about the Chinese having their autonomy. So how like, as an outsider that's not in China, it's going to be hard to argue to a lot of people that we need voices that are from the other end, from China, to really have validity to the argument about the NED. Because a lot of people don't know what the NED is and what the OAS are, and these, like, it's very real. And the fact that they're using the CIA is all automatically worrisome to me. But I'm saying for the general public, here's a person from Hong Kong telling you, like, oh no, this isn't about imperialism. This is about democracy. It's going to be really hard to fight that narrative.
Yeah, well, that's why I love this video, because he really breaks it down. Afshin really ties connects the dots. And we're going to have Carl Zara, a guy who's kind of on the other side of this coin, on the show tomorrow to talk about these things. But watch how, and I love the way he gets spanked right here. Afshin just passively spanks him about, like, don't try to just brush off the NED like it's nothing. Go ahead, Johnny.
Well, I have no idea what that kind of accusation that you brought up. What's the ground of that? Was it merely someone writing something on the website of the organization? No, if you go check on the protest side of Hong Kong people carrying their own, resources to the ground, and they are supporting the movement by their own. Even though there are international organizations like voicing support to Hong Kong, but that doesn't mean that there are direct links, financially or organizationally. It is false accusation, and I don't think what you have pointed out about the link of NED to Hong Kong movement is, a correct description.
I'm not sure the hundreds of millions of people whose governments have been destabilized by the National Endowment for Democracy, arguably over the decades, would agree. Tell me about the Hong Kong Democracy Council.
All right, that was it real quick. He goes on to this next part, which we're going to get into real quick, because it ties all, U.S. Congress to this stuff, U.S. imperialism, to the connections in Hong Kong. But I love the way he kind of smirked and said, I don't think the millions of people whose government's been destabilized. Can
you name some of those?
Oh, yeah, Nicaragua at one point, all these groups. When you talk about Ukraine was in there with the NED, anything with George Soros, go name it, But
saying? Isn't that an anti-Semitic trope, using George Soros automatically?
It is. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that is an argument that has come up time and time again.
I'm smirking because
trying
it's
to be
such a
like,
bullshit.
Because I just see a lot of the other side, are you making these arguments?
Yeah.
You can't just use that. You have to specify, what do you mean by George Soros?
When you point out money lines to regime change, that is not being anti-Semitic in any way, shape, or form. And you can still try to use that argument when we try to point these things out. I don't care. It's, you say anything, any mention of, George Soros, or if you talk about Netanyahu or any of these, if you say the Israeli government's right wing, all of a sudden people start telling you it's an anti-Semitic trope, whatnot. But I'm not playing that game anymore, because George Soros and his connections with all these countries, the NED was started right during the Somoza time in Nicaragua, because it was bringing so much information to light that they had to go around people's back and sell cocaine from Colombia, Freeway Rick Ross, to make crack and put it on the street so they can give weapons to the Somozas to fight against the Nicaraguan Sandinista government. They got caught.
That
so what do they do? They formed the NED outside of that to say, okay, we can't do this anymore. So we have to funnel taxpayer dollar make it look like we're going for endowment for democracy, because the NED is anything
It's a
but
front.
that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
In
what we're
essence.
doing, we're taking our tunes, we're taking our information, we're taking our orders from the CIA for our imperialistic ways, period. Bottom line. And people will become hip to this and the NED and what they are. Now watch this part right here too as well, because Afshin ties it right to the government, the Marco Rubios and all these. You love Marco Rubio,
Oh,
Bolivia.
yeah,
Come
he's my
on
best
now.
friend.
Watch this part.
You're on the board of.
Well, it's a Hong Kong people-led organization that focus on the advocacy work on the U.S. So it does not directly involve in the local ground protest in Hong Kong.
Right, but it's called the Hong Kong Democracy Council, and it seems to have direct links to lobbying in Washington for laws that suggest unless Hong Kong enacts legislation that helps Washington, there should be U.S. sanctions on China.
Well, I think the core rationale behind the law is when China is failed to commit itself to the promise of Sino-British Joint Declaration, the world should hold it accountable, because the declaration is signed by British and Chinese government, and it is tabled in the United Nations. So when we are talking about the preferential treatment of Hong Kong, that is a major premise of that, which is Hong Kong remains autonomous. So if Hong Kong is under the direct autocratic control from China, it is just an ordinary Chinese city. So why the world should offer preferential treatment to Hong Kong? I think this is the logic behind. So I don't think the way to confuse the use of words and the rationale behind the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act help the discussion.
Except it's not the world, is it? It's a tiny minority of countries, NATO countries, that we're talking about. Most of the world isn't making a big fuss about this Hong Kong Act, and perhaps they see that it is absurd that China should abide by US legislation over what is part of its country.
I think that is also another false perception towards the Act, because the Act is about whether the U.S. should continue to give preferential treatment to Hong Kong, which from the perspective of China, that could possibly be the internal policy of the U.S. instead of like meddling Hong Kong issue. And we have to understand that the international status of Hong Kong is being recognized by the international community because they have to show that they remain strong rule of law and autonomy so that the world trusts its own system.
Okay, wait,
But
just to be clear, I mean,
All right. Just go 20 more seconds and then we'll stop it real quick because I want you to hear what
I
he
don't want to
says.
just talk about. I don't want to just talk about the U.S. Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which Marco Rubio lobbied for with Joshua Wong, your colleague, and Samuel Chu. But it clearly says sanctions should be put on China if China does not serve U.S. interests.
Right there.
Right.
I mean, what sort of act is that? I presume you.
All right. See, so what I'm saying is right now is
Right.
like people don't understand what's going on there.
No.
Like, how do we have the gall to go in there and try to dictate what's going on?
Right.
You know, Hong Kong belongs to China, and they would, they've waited a long time. A lot of people in Hong Kong do love the motherland. You know what I'm saying? There are some people who are really upset, and really the truth about it is, fam, this situation started because of the austerity measures in Hong Kong. It's under British colony rule. They use our monetary system, and they have a lot of homeless people and a lot of youth who don't have jobs. There aren't jobs, and they have rich people
Right.
in Hong Kong. So you have these young, frustrated people
Who are blaming China.
Exactly. They twisted
Right.
the narrative, and they're saying, blame China. They're going to come in. They're going to take away your simple freedoms, all this stuff.
Happened a lot in Venezuela and other countries that the United States has manipulated people in these countries to think that it is those people, those presidents in power that have neglected them when it has been the U.S. imperialism through sanctions, through stopping the gold, like let's say in Venezuela, like all of these things that we do, they don't even get to see it because they're experiencing it. They don't get to see what's happening behind the scenes. So nobody here is trying to say that we know more about China than a Chinese person. but we are saying that we know more about U.S. imperialism and what the U.S. government has done and is capable and continues to do. And when you have people like Marco Rubio promoting sanctions, and you have Democrats agreeing with him, and people like Joe Biden saying that he wants to go to war with China, you have a situation where it is a very dangerous and precarious situation, because as Pasta said, yes, China is the new Cold War, but that could also be the new war in general.
And to be clear, Joe Biden said he wanted to move 75% of the naval fleets into the South China Sea during a debate. Nobody called him on it. Nobody questioned it.
Because nobody gets it.
And that is essentially going to war if you're going right into their homeland. Remember, it's called the South China Sea where you're trying to go. One more minute here. And this kid got beat up the whole time. In the beginning of this whole thing, fam, he talked about, undisclosed location because of the new Article 63 that we had talked about. I didn't want to play the whole beginning. And then there's a whole part about the Uyghurs that I left out. But I just want to play this 1 minute. And then I want to play his face as the credits are going. Because, we work in this business now that when somebody's face, the camera doesn't miss anything. Yeah. And this kid makes a face just like, oh, my God, I just got my ass kicked from me. But watch this last minute, because once again, we got to talk about the NED backed by the U.S. government, involving and lobbying for power in Hong Kong.
You lobbied for this act.
Well, I think this is definitely for Hong Kong's people's point of view. We need to hold China accountable, and that's what the world failed to do so for
So you're saying
decade.
The view of normal people on the street in Hong Kong is they should be a de facto colony of the United States?
Well, I don't think that is a direct link of so-called colony and colonial states. And that kind of colonial mindset towards the current international affairs is absolutely wrong. Hong Kong is not under U.S., and that kind of relevant sanctioning mechanism, like the Magnitsky Act, is being implemented all over the world. It is not only about China; it's about all the human rights all the human rights violators in the world. So I don't think that kind of colonial mindset is still applicable in current state of mind. And I think you are using the wrong comparison to understand what's happening in Hong Kong.
Of course, the Magnitsky Act, Russia alleging that that is related to NATO nation intelligence services. Tell me,
that's good.
Why?
Well, pretty much, the Magnitsky Act he talked about, which also kind of allows for the sanctions of Russia and anywhere else. Mm-hmm. It was further to progress the sanction war. In other words, I talk to people about sanctions all the time. They still think that they're okay. They're like, oh, yeah, I guess sanctions are okay. Sanctions are needed. They don't understand how sanctions really affect the most vulnerable, how they really don't make the government do anything. It just, all the poor people die when it comes to sanctions, when we put our foot on the neck of people when it comes to our sanctions. Okay. So he got spanked this whole freaking interview, and watch the end credits and watch Nathan's face.
Nathan Law, hope you're safe. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that's it for the show. We'll be back on Monday, 4 years after UK Prime Minister David Cameron resigned after failing to keep Britain in the EU and overseeing a policy of austerity that led to deaths of the citizens he vowed to protect. Until then, wash your hands. Join the Underground on YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud.
He was like,
But wait a minute, Pasta. What about the Uyghurs?
We're going to talk about the Uyghurs. I don't want to get into it. It's a whole conversation. We're going to talk about the Uyghurs, where a lot of the information came from about the Uyghurs, about all the people we talked about. But I did bring up this article right over here. We'll save the Uyghurs for tomorrow. We'll talk about that some more.
Because that's everybody's go-to. What about Tibet? What about the Uyghurs? What about these situations, Pasa? How
India,
can you
China.
How can you that they are imprisoning Muslims just for being Muslim, Pasa?
Well,
how can you be okay with that?
We're going to talk about that, and I got a lot of footage of mosque open in Western China everywhere, where they don't just imprison people for being Muslim. Yeah, once again, I don't want to say 100%. I've never been there. But tomorrow we're going to talk to somebody who's really knowledgeable when it comes to that information. His name is Carl Zah. I even got a tweet in here, and you can go look him up. But let's take a look at We're going to talk about that tomorrow, fam. Believe you me, I can start talking about the Uyghurs. I'll be here another 2 hours. Connections run deep with the Hong Kong freedom fighters, the NED. This is Hong Kong's opposition unites with Washington hardliners to preserve U.S.'s own political and economic interests. Johnny, who's that picture of right there, first of all? Oh!
Aw,
Nancy.
Nance.
And you can see right behind Joshua.
Mama
there's
Bear.
There's Nathan Law, whatnot. There's the crew. The band's back together. But if you go down to the bottom of the article, it really talks about this one section. Oh, there's Joshua Wong with Mr. Rubio. Josh Wong and Nathan Law. They're
Don't
buddies.
worry, you guys. Marco Rubio has China's best interests at heart.
There he is. He talks about it. It makes it look like they're just under authoritarian rule and stuff. But it really talks about the connections of the NED in this whole thing, about the NED board, fam. I believe if you go down, there's a whole section and a list of people on the NED. Okay, Hong Kong activists unite with the NED U.S. regime change establishment. And look, the organization features a number of prominent Hong Kong activists as board members. These include, and you go down, here's the name. Oh, founder of the New York. All the NED is all over this whole situation. They have their roots everywhere. Joseph Ning, Samuel Chu, Nathan Law. There he is. Jeffrey No, all down below. The NED's board. You can look at this article, ladies and gentlemen. Here it is. These figures include Michael Davis. Oh, fellow at the National Endowment for Democracy, Larry Diamond. Guess where he's at? Sharon Hom, Executive Director of Human Rights in China, a longtime guarantee of the NED. NED is all over this group, fam. We reported this months ago. It doesn't change. The NED still has their little mittens. The National Endowment for Democracy, and you can look them up, fam. It's anything but. Am I right or am I wrong? We know about the NED. Ladies and gentlemen, you know about the NED.
National Endowment for Democracy. So it's just an organization, basically, that is a front for U.S. regime change. That's really what they are.
That's it.
I mean, that is literally what they are. They can call themselves pro-democratic. They can call themselves whatever they want. They're literally a front, just like a lot of fronts exist. They're a front for U.S. imperialism.
And
CIA.
here we go. Is Chen. Weehu left this tweet. This is very embarrassing. Julie Etta, a U.S. diplomat in Hong Kong, was caught meeting with the Hong Kong protest leaders. It would be hard to imagine the U.S. reaction if Chinese diplomats were meeting with the leaders of Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, or Never Trump protesters.
There's
great. Nathan Lane over there, Joshua Wong. The band's back together, but don't say that the United States was interfering, fam. They're fighting against authoritarian ways.
Let's meet with some, some of the anti-pro-democracy people in China and see what the United States has to say about it, because that's pretty much what they're doing. And we can all agree that China has authoritarianism, that it exists in China. Nobody's denying that these people are under authoritarian rule. However, that does not mean that we need to go in there and colonize Hong Kong. It doesn't mean that we need to go in there and try to take over their government and in so many ways that we've done to so many other countries, or even get involved. Nobody's asking here to paint China as this sort of angel, but what we are saying right now on the show is that we need to keep our hands off China, just like we needed to keep our hands off Venezuela and many other countries that we've pretty much overthrown their leaders and put a pro-capitalist leader there instead, so we could profit off of it, so we could continue being the empire, and so they can be a sort of colony of ours. I mean, just look at how we treated Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's still not an independent country, but they also don't get the same ability to vote like everybody else. I mean, this is not. It's not okay that we do this around the world.
And they've been left out to dry since that hurricane. Nothing has really been changed over there. And let me tell you something, fam. This is, and I love what you just said there. This is not really about fighting authoritarianism. If it really was, it'd be a different thing. But this is about promoting imperialism by way of capitalism. We want to put our businesses in Hong Kong. We want Hong Kong to stay detached from China, whatnot. And at this point, I don't even know what China feels about Hong Kong. If I'm Xi Jinping, I guess there's other kind of ways, but I'd be like, you know what? Have Hong Kong. They're almost bankrupt anyways. You ruined them. They got more people in poverty. Go do what you want to do. But we can't do that because military-wise, they want the Stinger missiles. It's
military-wise, it's too close to China.
It's right on the China, so that's the reason why they can't. But this was in the acts, and this was in the works for a long time, because here's Nancy Pelosi, your girl, fam.
Oh,
November 17th, 2015, honorably met Joshua Wong, a student leader who led a big protest demanding universal suffrage in Hong Kong.
Nancy Pelosi will never have your best
Nance.
interest for you, for anybody. She doesn't even have the best interest for her people in America. You think she's going to somehow be magically adept at figuring out what the people of in China and Hong Kong need? No, she's not. So anything that Nancy Pelosi, Marco Rubio, and all these neocons and neoliberals have their hands on is something that you have to be very, 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 very suspect of.
Yeah. And the next tweet I have, and this is a whole nother section I was looking into. I only put one tweet about it because I want to explain the cultural differences between mainlander Chinese people and Hong Kongers, because they have this kind of sense of entitlements that they're different, whatnot. And the way they treat a lot of mainland people is disgusting. It's very xenophobic. It's very racist in itself. And they've had a lot of issues where they said a lot of people that they wanted to have some Black Lives Matter protests in Hong Kong. And the leaders of the Hong Kong protests and whatnot have kind of been no, we have to stay with our message, or trying to hijack the we can't breathe. But this is Carl Zha, who's going to be on here. Remember, I said I'm going to bring Carl Zha on because I want to speak about the culture of China. Because I think people, Richard Wolff said, a lot of people don't understand about China, but they want to make so many accusations about them, and it's the country we know least about. I want to talk about the cultural differences. Now, Carl Zha put up here, Shina is a Japanese word for China that became derogatory during the Sino-Japanese War. Post-war Japan Gov banned its use in kanji form, Chinese characters, in official document. Yet some people in Hong Kong and Taiwan use it to insult people from Chinese mainland. It equals chink in English.
Oh.
They're spraying this
Spray painting.
Spray painting is disgusting. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know what I'm saying? And they've had a lot of situations where a lot of these Hong Kong protesters beat up a lot of Chinese mainlanders, older people. You know what I'm saying? It's disgusting, and nobody really talks about that in the mainstream media.
But what about the oppressed protesters in Hong Kong?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's I'm saying all this
they're
stuff
not the
because
oppressed.
this is like
protesters protest, but we don't have to be funding it.
Exactly.
Why do we get the right to fuel it? Let's just stay off. Hands off Hong Kong. Let's see it play out naturally, like it should have played out naturally in Libya. But what happens? We fuel the situation. We fuel it for our own corporate gain, and we don't care who dies and who gets put in charge. There is a bigger despair of inequality in Hong Kong than there is in mainland China, Beijing. And that's calls us one view from Hong Kong. Why do Chinese people object to be called chinks? Utterly baffling.
I mean,
and look at it, he's like saying they're sensitive.
Yeah, and here's the thing. It's like, I'm not here to judge what that word means or whatever, but like, obviously it's offensive to some people. In America, you can't say certain words because it's offensive to some people. And, we have that whole situation going on. So who are we to say what is offensive and what isn't?
Fam, something to point out right now. And that's true. There's so much stuff we can go there. They were using the Peppy frog out there, these people. People are going to be shocked. Bannon claims Wuhan lab employees have defected and are working with the FBI. So, fam, here it comes. China puts a law into play. We're going to start rooting out these NGOs. We're going to get rid of the NED. Mm-hmm. We're going to get rid of the CIA. We're going to take Hong Kong back. Well, what's going to happen? Now here comes the conspiracy theories. We've got people defecting from Beijing that's going to tell us the truth on how China threw out this virus to kill people in the world. We need to go in there. This is what's going to happen, fam, and this is why I'm so scared when I talk about the anti-Chinese rhetoric.
Yeah.
This is the stuff. Here is Bannon putting out the conspiracy theorists right now. Conspiracy theories. You know what I'm saying? And it's going to come. We're going to get more and more anti-Chinese as we head down the pipeline. So pretty much, I just want to put that story out there. What's going on? The new law. Expect us more stuff to happen from China. The whole Indian thing, they're going to really exasperate that whole situation too as well. But we're going to be talking with Carl Zha and talking about that stuff.